All right, class, this is segment 2 for the French and Indian War lecture. In the past, we had gone over a couple things. Number one, looking at what the main idea was that you needed to be able to talk about and explain and discuss after viewing this lecture. Remember that the British victory over the French in North America enlarged the British Empire. Yes, they got a lot of land from the war, from the Treaty of Paris, but, and this is what we're going to talk about here in this segment, that it led to new conflicts with the colonists. They end salutary neglect, and this is going to cause tension and resentment from the American colonists. Now, why does it matter? It's because these events that happened after the French and Indian War, after the Treaty of Paris is signed in 1763, these will have an impact and ultimately lead to the American Revolution. We looked at the French colony, which became known as New France. We looked at some of the defining characteristics of the French colonies and how they were different from the British. We saw how old George Washington, who will become our first president, we saw how he played a role in the opening shots of the French and Indian War when he attacked the French fort Duquesne in July of 1754. We said that because of the style of fighting that the French and the Indians were employing, the British weren't used to them, and they suffered large numbers, both in casualties and the number of battles lost. 1757, important year, William Pitt, Prime Minister, changes how the war is going to be fought on the side of the British. We need a large army. We need a well-equipped army. So he's going to get 50,000 strong. It's going to be the largest and best equipped army in the world. It comes at a heavy cost. And then we looked at 1759 was a turning point in the war. The Battle of Quebec, French capital, or the capital of New France. Once the British are able to capture Quebec, it is all but over. And so how did Great Britain's victory change the balance of power? Well, they are the dominant power in North America. And so with victory brings problems. It brought problems with the Native Americans in the form of Pontiac's Rebellion. And it brings problems because now policies that were implemented by the British in 1763 that marked an end to salutary neglect. Remember, salutary neglect was a policy that the British had been using with the colonies ever since the end of the Glorious Revolution. Remember, if you salute something, you respect it. So it's a respectful type of neglect. We respect you guys. We know that you are able to govern yourselves and able to handle your own business. So we're going to leave you be and let you do what you want to do as long as you remain loyal to us. And up until 1763, this is the way the British have been, this is how they viewed their relationship with the colonies. 1763 changes all that. The Proclamation of 1763. King George III says, because we don't want any more trouble with the Native Americans, you cannot go past the Appalachian Mountains. He banned settlement west of the Appalachian Mountains. This was what the war was fought over. The Ohio Valley. What do you mean that we cannot go past the Appalachian Mountains? What do you mean we cannot settle on the land that we fought and we died and bled for? You know, this seems kind of hypocritical. Then why did we fight this war? That's what the colonists are saying. That's what they're asking themselves. That's where they're asking the representatives. And that's where they're ultimately going to ask King George III. Another way that salutary neglect came to an end is when George Grenville becomes Prime Minister of Great Britain. And he changes, this period, or he changes the policy that the British had towards the colonists. No more salutary neglect. Why? The British need money. All right. The war over this continent had doubled the national debt, and so you need to be able to pay for that. And it's not only up to the people in Great Britain to pay taxes for this war, but the British view this war as a war fought for the colonists, for the protection and security of the colonies in America. So they should have to pay their fair share. And you will see that because Great Britain needs money to pay off their debt, we will see an end to the policy of salutary neglect. George Grenville does two things here early on that shows that the British are serious about ending salutary neglect. Number one, he starts enforcing something called the Writs of Assistance. The Writs of Assistance, they are essentially, they're allowing the British to have a search warrant. All right, it's a general search warrant that allows British officials to search any colonial ship, any building that they believe that was holding smuggled goods. And this, is a change in policy because ever since salutary neglect became, the policy for the British, the Navigation Acts weren't, strictly enforced. So there had been a lot of smuggling. Now all of a sudden the British are saying, wait a minute, anybody or any ship or any building that we suspect might be smuggling goods, we can search it because of the Writs of Assistance. This outrages the merchants of Boston. This outrages the businessmen of the New England colonies. Why? Not only do they see this as a infringement on their rights, not only do they see this as the British turn their back on a policy that had been put into place for 50 years or so, but a lot of these merchants worked out of their homes, and so the Writs of Assistance actually allowed British officials to enter and search colonial homes, whether there was evidence of smuggling or not. Just if they believe there was smuggled goods in there, they can come into your home and search it. The second thing that Grenville does, which would raise money and which would outrage the colonists, is he passes the Sugar Act in 1764. Before, the Sugar Act was passed, the colonists weren't really so concerned about paying taxes for goods coming in. They saw this as a way to regulate trade and commerce. However, with the Sugar Act, it does three things. Number one, it placed duties on certain imports that had not been taxed before. So certain things that had been coming into the colonies, never been taxed before, now all of a sudden there's going to be a tax. Number two, and this is the most important one, it strengthened the enforcement of the law, allowing prosecutors to try smuggling cases in vice admiralty courts rather than a colonial court. This means that if you're caught smuggling goods, you will not be sent, all right, in front of you'll not be sent to a courtroom in the colonies where you might have a jury of your peers deciding your fate, who would possibly be and probably be more sympathetic to what you're doing. No, instead, in these vice admiralty courts, you will see that the case will be decided by one judge. All right? And to make matters worse, this judge received 5% of any cargo the courts confiscated from convicted smugglers. So they had a strong motive for finding accused persons guilty. They could make money off of it. And the third one is that it cut the duty or cut the tax on foreign-made molasses in half, hoping that the colonists would rather pay a lower tax than risk arrest by smuggling. But even if they said, oh, okay, we're going to kind of, lower the tax on molasses and sugar, these colonial merchants, these colonies, they still complain that the Sugar Act would reduce their profits. And here's the most important part about the Sugar Act. This is what they complain about. When you are putting us in those vice admiralty courts, when you're taxing goods that have never been taxed before, all right, you are violating our rights. You are violating, the right to tax colonists, all right, because these colonists had no representations in Parliament. You are violating our rights as English citizens. That's what the colonists are saying. We have no representation in Parliament. How can you tax us, and how can you fairly tax us? How can you justify this Sugar Act if there is no representation for us in Parliament? So the Sugar Act is the first of many acts that were passed by the Parliament in an attempt to raise money, and in an attempt to show the colonists that salutary neglect is over and that the British Crown and the British Parliament will redefine the relationship between the American colonies, and Great Britain. Events like this, the Proclamation of 1763, the Writs of Assistance, the Sugar Act of 1764, these are the first of many events that would ultimately lead to the American Revolution. Stay tuned for our future lectures, which will touch on these future acts as we watch the colonists grow closer and closer and closer to that point of no return in which they declare their independence from Great Britain. Stay tuned.